Good evening, everybody. System Shock here with the 165th episode of our first run through the House of Light expansion for Book of Hours, playing as the Archaeologist. We've been working our way through, a couple of things. One, we've been trying to go through some big books, and then I'm going to be leveling up a few different skills. Now, I've changed the plans in order a little bit. I was working on Aronoscopy, and then on the list that I had, Furs and Feathers was next, but Furs and Feathers only takes a couple of lessons. And so I thought it might be better to try and do something a little more ambitious like Sky Stories. And in fact, the way I'm thinking about it here, I'll still take Aronoscopy up to its next level. I'll take it up to 7. And I think with what I have left, so that'll be for 7. I think I'll take Sky Stories all the way, so that will be 2 of those Watchman's Paradoxes. That doesn't leave me a ton for Furs and Feathers, but I'll worry about that later. It's mostly a question of dealing with the existing texts that I have. The big question mark right now is what's going to be happening with the opportunities. Again, as long as I remember to add the relevant furniture, I should be good. And I believe we've already locked in all of the other books, so we are good to go. I don't think I'm going to go to Crowcross Sands or the more... Well, we still have plenty of time, so... So I think it'll be Soul first. Yeah. I'm willing to pass that up. I'll probably even be able to use the art if it comes to it, but... Okay, with Keeper Level Knock, Glassfinger Toxin is a precursor of the Sacrament Ascite. I may make a replacement Amethyst Ampule if the opportunity comes up, but that's not on the top of the list, let's say. I also really thought I had at least one more Sacrament Ascite. It's got a few things on the shelf here, but I will figure that out later, especially because we don't necessarily know what's required. All right, let's see what the roll gives us. Comfort. Stretch my legs and change my point of view. Increase relevant aspects by using a comfort. Prison Stool, a cheerful lavender color, possibly to encourage rehabilitative enthusiasm. So that'll take us up to the 18. Reverend Timothy is now 14 knocks, so just to verify that's what we needed for the Wintry Forbidding, we will now talk. Reverend Timothy is always, always happy to chat. And of course, the wonderful revelation. This is not going to be the sort of thing that maybe even makes it into like a Steam review. But there is... actually, it's kind of funny. There's a... at work, there's a writers group that I participate in. And there's one of the participants gave a presentation on verisimilitude, which... it was fine enough. Like I don't want to fault them for doing it, but it was definitely one of those examples where I'm trying to think of the right way to put this. This will sound meaner than I intend, but there's a phenomena I noticed for a while when I was a little bit more active in streaming communities, and I kind of found that like the way you'd get your name out there is to like give a talk, and it didn't really matter if you didn't know what you were talking about. You know, the point was the talk. The point was drawing attention to yourself, which I kind of need to respect is probably how the game is played, and this is how people network and get their positions. I mean, some of the worst offenders of these are actually people who do have proper jobs in the game industry as a result of that. So it's one of these things, as with all cases, like people may be playing a different game from what you perceive, but it was something I always felt a little uncomfortable with, and I got a very direct feeling of that when in a local community I think someone was trying to get me involved, and so they asked if I could give a talk, and I sort of thought, yeah, there's probably a couple things that I can do on this, and part of it was just like really encouraging people to, I think the large part of what I had to say on that particular, in that particular case was just to quiet the, the voice of doubt and a few things, and particularly along the lines of, trying to get past the idea that everyone does ... therefore you should do it. So like once upon a time, no streamers used face cams, and now everybody seems to be using face cams. And now there's some really successful ones who don't, and VTubers are a thing, and so on and so forth. And so it's all just, basically it all comes back to William Goldman's, advice in Adventures in the Screen Trade. Nobody knows anything. And it turns out that was really well received. It sort of hit the intended notes of making people feel like they could, but essentially the target audience for that was someone who was on the margin, someone who wanted to start streaming and maybe just needed that final push, or maybe that final bit of permission to say that it was okay. But that permission comes in the form of saying that you don't need to wait for anyone's permission, that there are no barriers to entry, and you should probably just take the time when nobody's paying attention to you to figure out what you're doing. And that was good. And then what I noticed was there was someone who I think actually makes a living doing this. I think they're reasonably well known for their sports stuff. And like, it was the exact opposite. It was all about like, you need to have a good camera and you need to have a good mic and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, you're not that big, and this is kind of bad advice. So anyways, I was making a point here about Reverend Timothy. So the presentation in the work group wasn't quite as bad as the example I gave before. I kind of felt I needed to give that example just so I didn't make this too nasty to the anonymous speaker. But it definitely struck me as an example where I think the point of the talk was more about giving a talk and maybe a little bit less researched than I personally would have liked, especially on a topic about writing in a writer's group. But I'm also just judgmental, so take that as you will. But in one of these cases here, right, this is one of the things I sort of like, is that nobody would have complained. In fact, if anything, people would say, well, now I don't have any reason to bring in Reverend Timothy, right? He takes longer than the other ones. And it's not, this is unbalanced. If you start off with Faust, if the Twiceborn is at a disadvantage because now it takes 45 seconds to get Reverend Timothy, memories from Reverend Timothy, and so on and so forth. So, you could have this exact same text with 30 seconds. And yet, it's one of these things that when you notice, you appreciate it. And it's just one of these things that gives you this confidence that the people making it really, really thought this through. And one thing I really appreciated about it, I don't think this is something that would drive someone who wasn't looking for this to start looking at the game differently. But it does sort of give you a nice little reminder that small, seemingly irrelevant details actually do have meaning, right? So one of the examples that I like to take for Cultist Simulator is the fact that Ibn al-Adim, out of the people who you interact with, including mentors, does not have the mortal aspect. The game never draws attention to that fact. It's just something in fact, it's not even something that's there, it's something that's not there. And yet there is quite a bit of information that is contained in that. And so likewise, this is just a subtle little way of saying that, how do we represent people who talk too much? Something I'm utterly not familiar with. In my defense, my character does have 8 shaft. But the way that this game represents talking too much is basically getting an extra 15 seconds in the talk verb, and I always appreciated that. It's also, I think, just one of those nice little moments where, you know, once you notice it, it just puts a smile on your face. So the skill is now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. And if the connection to the writers group stuff wasn't there, it's like this would have been one of the examples I would give of in a talk like that, just because I feel it's unconventional and interesting enough that that people would appreciate it. Okay, the Deaths of the Moon, a historical tract on various forms of survival after death. When the heart no longer beats, the grail may keep the spirit in the body, and an appetite is indicated to sustain. Alukites are the best known, but not the only of this nature. This is the waning moon mode. The full moon mode is the intensification of one element of the soul to the point where ordinary sustention is unstable. Our protector, the generous of hosts, began of this nature, and its generosity remains ungentle. It is possible for the body's health or the heart's core to outpace the other elements, so that a static mode becomes impossible and growth proceeds in dramatic stages until balance remanifests. So that's definitely going for Anbury and Lapidary. Better now. Money. So, while it would be nice to try and get some balance back for the desks, I would like to generate as many memories as I can. Let's say if I'm going to be focusing on... So actually, moon-wise, I think I'm... no, I can get a contradiction, and I think that would be helpful, in fact. I'm going to settle for Honey, a comprehensive guide, but I think I'm out of sync on where I wanted to be. Although I may have just delayed the leveling for Aronoscopy now that I think of it. The Road to Janus. The Limian Burzgash makes a series of prophecies regarding the initiates of the House of Silence with intricate, if unhelpful, predictions on their passage through the house. The 6th initiate is priest and key, gate and church. He shall cross the sea and open the tide. He shall not be the 11th, yet shall there be 7 between them. In the first year of his time, the flower door is opened. The 12th initiate is salvation and rack, steed and rider, who chooseth one blossom of 3, who casteth away the key, and whom the key shall not cast away, who comes after the flame and before the snow. Okay, that's a... I'm pretty sure I can make use of this. I may need to rearrange a couple things, though. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, a little reluctant to use gossip. Although on the matter and deeds of serpents will give me a little edge, so... Or not edge. It'll give me some help. I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. Also, this will seem a little reckless for my current plans. I'm going to do the whist to start off with. Crack open the container, delight in your discovery. So this basically will just involve a bit more planning on my part as far as the memories are concerned, but I think I can manage this. Okay, unhatched hymns. Hymns attributed to St. Lucia the Eyeless, patron of glassworkers and name of the hour called Menascate. The hymns venerate every sanctioned hour, celebrating them as the sun undivided, but also suggesting that each hour may become the next. Madrigad to watchman, watchman to wolf, and so on. The hymn of the phases celebrates the Menascate from whom we do not turn, for the truth which is beauty, the beauty which is truth, and the perfect balance between the two. The hymn of the reflections, more puzzlingly, celebrates the Menascate as the sister of Janus, mother of shadow, whose visage wondrous in emptiness can reveal all truths. So the sky's the really valuable stuff. Dumotu corporum veditorum. The author rejoices in the name of Abelard Hubris, and the title might be translated as On the Forbidden Motions of Bodies, evidently a reference to Newton's Dumotu corporum, published some 20 years previously. Hubris's thesis, that stars, planets, and other bodies are the proxies or even essences of the hours, and that conjunctions and occlusions reveal the outcome of hour intrigues in the Mansus. Hubris declares that the Great Comet of 1577 was the physical embodiment of the hour named Madrigad, that it disintegrated, but its fragments gravitate to bone marrow, where they can be located even now. He insists that oronoscopic techniques can be used with essential periost and sufficient sky to create a talisman centrifugic. Deaths and their evasions. Father Stanislav John Schaller writes of the means and limitation of passage between the orders of the Mansus. No long names hours. Unusually, Father John has written this book in Fucine for, he says, a special secrecy. He speaks very cautiously of the exceptions that can sometimes be made to the edicts of Chancel and Calyptra, and hints at the means by which he successfully returned a lantern long to flesh. Schaller mentions most cautiously of all that he has been permitted to see a book that speaks more deeply on the matter, but that it was surrendered into the shadow of a covenant stone of the watchman's tree. It can be retrieved if the 99th wink is reserved under the edict's liminal. Okay. I do need to read these again, but I wasn't sure. It is written, Musgrave, fourth of the De Wolf line, writes tentatively about the covenant of Brandkrug and the legacy of the sacred inks he calls Incausta Potentialia. As light passeth through a prism into many colors, so the great ink separateth into lesser inks, and the lesser inks into inks minor. Musgrave coyly refuses to talk of the great inks, or else refuses to admit he doesn't know much about them. He insists that Ugol and Stargol, which can be mixed with sufficient nectar or sky aspect, are sufficient for most befitting purposes. The Orchid Transfigurations, A Feast, a compilation of quasi-Rosicrucian allegories, supposedly by Robert Flood. This is in the original Latin. The illustrations are certainly striking. They flush the skin and glow beneath the eyelids after the book is closed. We must devour to be devoured. We cannot be undevoured as we cannot be unborn. Okay, so I've already locked away I've already locked away the consider verb for the next 50 seconds. We're getting a moon from contradictions, and we are getting... Right, okay. So let's set aside some things that are exclusively for the oronoscopy. So stolen secret, intuition technically works for both. Salt, clouds. So then the contradiction in 45 seconds. At which point I think I'm going to have to give up one of the sky or one of the... Yeah. Sorry, I'm just going to double check this one last time. Oh, solace. And in fact, that's going to work regardless. think I'm stuck with the rest, though. Okay, so with that in mind, we'll get a solace and we'll get a contradiction. So that's 5 of the 6 that I need. And so at that point, I'd say maybe the solace will be the one that I give up. So from there, I would want Sky Stories. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 from the 7 from the threshold. So the problem here is, as much as I'd like to get ahead of the next batch of reading, I believe I have already used all the rose stuff. No, that's not true. I can get a gossip. Of course, I may also get that from Reverend Timothy, so... But... Actually, yeah, you know what? I can afford to do that all at the same time. So we're going to leave the desks alone for a little bit. I guess the last item would be... Maybe I want to use the Elements of the Soul to boost... Was it really surgeries and exsanguinations and... Let me just take a second. Yes, so surgeries and exsanguinations. Horns and ivories. Okay. And both of them are 5. So I could use the pattern. I could use... So just looking at the things that I already have access to. I could use a pattern. I could use a fear. I could use hindsight. But I think that would limit me until I can get access to the others. So yeah, at this point here, just leaving it all be and working out how I want to spend the second half of the day is the right path forward. I believe we'll get one more... No, I think this should be the last... Okay, just as well I didn't get them gossip then. Reverend Timothy is always, always happy to chat. Again, not necessarily the most efficient use of the day, but I'm kind of okay with it. I have a couple things I can maybe chuck my Elements of the Soul into if it really comes down to it. But I think we should have at least one more good push in terms of a skill to move up, and then one of the reasons why I didn't sort of... There's an easy way for me to just sort of bang out a couple of points for like furs and feathers and stuff like that. I specifically wanted to avoid doing that because those are great ones that I can do at sort of the end of the day. So, Honey, the Comprehensive Guide. Harvey Haddington, pilot, polymath, confectioner, writes with great enthusiasm about the marvelous work of the bee. Haddington insists that all the primary aspects, nectar, scale, heart, lantern, moth, grail, are possessed by bees and expressed in honey. Clearly, he points out, there are only 6 primary aspects, as honeycomb has only 6 angles. Ugol ink is prepared with these techniques, but so is Skinshuck mead, and only Skinshuck requires honey. Just as any beverage or foodstuff can be improved with the addition of honey, so any garden is improved by the presence of bees, even those bloody blumberendi. Okay. So, just so I can be clear, this is... Yes, we're waiting 13 seconds for this one for sure. And we've got a glinting cranial tchotchke. We all of us come to this condition in the end, but not all of us are fortunate enough to be lovingly buffed and fixed carefully to a stylish wooden stand. And on the matter and deeds of serpents, this was probably the prophecies of the Naga rendered into English and illustrated by William Midnight in Paris in the 1880s, but it shows a number of divergences from that text. It's certainly quite recent by the standards of VAC texts. The serpent folk, called the Great Hooded Princes, came to know the order called the House of Leith and warred across the miles with them. They made an alliance with the Mother of Ants, whose children they had been. The text describes how the Great Hooded Princes escaped, or will escape, from the fifth history, where they had died, or were doomed to die. They engage in a secret conquest of the land of the Great River, called India in some histories, and have ensured that all other conquests of that land are false conquests. Okay. So, now we start making some choices. Or, hang on, no. 10 seconds we start making some choices. This will leave me just shy... I think we can make it. The Rose of Hypatia, a volume of collected teachings of the Sisterhood of the Knot, that arcane contemplative order that existed in all histories, but in some was very powerful indeed. This was recorded by Hypatia and dedicated to Saint Nympha. Saint Nympha is described as not born but cultivated, the sentience that became the saint. Hypatia indicates... The sentience that became the saint, Hypatia indicates, inhabited a sinner's corpse in order to... Once more, with feeling. The Rose of Hypatia, a volume of collected teachings of the Sisterhood of the Knot, that arcane contemplative order that existed in all histories, but in some was very powerful indeed. This was recorded by Hypatia and dedicated to Saint Nympha. Saint Nympha is described as not born but cultivated. The sentience that became the saint, Hypatia indicates, inhabited a sinner's corpse in order to enable that sinner's redemption. Not all dead enter the mansis by the winter door. Not all dead enter the mansis at all. Now we're ready. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need to pick one of these to give up. Let's go for the storm. Or the intuition. Actually... Intuition. Just trying to think of which one Reverend Timothy might sabotage me with. Okay, so we'll use the Tryst. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Improve this skill to level 7. So there's a couple things that I want to do in terms of preparation here. So we're going to have basically 2 more blocks of reading. So one, I want to make sure I have enough elements of the soul to be able to get the reading done. And then I also want to make sure I have enough elements of the soul to actually be able to level the thing that I want to level. So first obvious question is, well, what am I going to move up? And in this case, we already decided that Sky Stories was the priority. In fact, just give me a second here. I'm going to update the list that I gave myself. So we need 7 for Sky Stories, and let's gonna move a few things here. Okay, so 1, 2. Well. Okay, so we really actually just need 1 more of these memories. So an obvious answer here would be something like the Occult Scrap. It'd be nice if I had... Oh no, here we go. The Gossip. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So, next question is, how do I get to level 8? Or move from 7. We've got 7. Now we want to move up from 8. So we'll set aside 1 FET for Watchman's Paradoxes. We'll set another, actually in this case we'll use one of the FOST. So we've got a core we can use at Ava's desk. We've got a whisk we can use at the Pale desk. A little reluctant to use the FET, but it's actually probably the best call here. Metal. Shaft. Health. Cool. So that's my first batch of readings to get Sky Stories leveled up. So from there, I have a couple of choices. I can either try to make a move on Furs and Feathers, which is trivial. Like there's not a whole lot that I need to do to level that up. Or I could try to make something of the knock memories that I got. So my two options there are basically the same. So we've got surgeries and exsanguinations and horns and ivories. I have a feeling horns and ivories would be the slightly better of the two. And it's just because there's less overlap with the Watchman's Paradoxes. Or is that true? So Cheerful Ditty has the heart. Savage... Actually, weirdly enough, I guess there's more overlaps with Horns and Ivories because of all this scale running around here. It's really just Secret Threshold. Interesting. Okay, so I guess surgeries and exsanguinations. So for that we would need 5. Well, okay, I say that, but where does all the other heart come from? The storm and the solace. So maybe it was a little quick. Yeah, I guess Horns and Ivories is the lesser of the two. Okay, well, let's focus first of all on getting Watchman's Paradoxes to the level that it needs to be. Now, the thing that's nice here is I can basically just duplicate everything that's on this list. So we'll use the core at Ava's desk. Singlefoot Songs. Whist for... I am going to use the phonograph. I know we did Opening the Sky recently, but it is nice to have a little bit more flexibility with the memories. Okay. So Confounding Parable, we are now on to Letters from a Fugitive. Guess we're back to Apollo and Marsyas. Tryst for... Salt doesn't work in this case. Solace does. Metal with the Gossip. I'm trying to remember. I think I've done this one before, but it's when it's 3. You cycle through them really quickly, so I'm never sure which of these are actually justified worries. Okay, I guess we did that recently. So, Intimations of Skin. Oh yes, I forgot the Secret Threshold book. And I used up the vac that I was supposed to use for that. Well, aren't I clever? Okay, so I think I can generate that Secret Threshold through other means. But I don't have to because I can just use an intuition. So, my next priority is going to be to try and get what I can for, sorry, not Furs and Feathers, Horns and Ivories. So I've already got the pattern for the knock. Well, On the Matter and Deeds of Serpents would help with that too. I could do, maybe just double check here, fear, gossip, and foresight. I think I'm going to focus on hindsight. And for that one, metal. I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. And of course, we still need to listen to Opening the Sky. And for that, I will use the Shapt. I've already mastered this, but I could reread it and perhaps recall a memory. Just as a... There we go. Cheeky little secret threshold as a bonus. I know we're a little over time, but we'll give it one more cycle with the memories, and then we'll see where the rest of the day takes us. The skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. So one thing that I can do here is just do a quick rearrangement. We do have enough for leveling Watchman's Paradoxes. In fact, or sorry, not Watchman's Paradoxes, Sky Stories. We're actually kind of counting on that, seeing as we'll lose these through the repeats. At last I approach mastery. Improve the skill to level 8. Okay. So I think that's a spot where I feel comfortable leaving it. So overall plan, I have... Oh, no. So the overall plan for the next episode, we've got one more for one more for Sky Stories, and that's going to take that up to level 9. The question then is, what can I get done with the rest of the day? So it's worth noting here that I've already sort of committed to leveling up Horns and Ivories. That means actually I should keep this health aside. So realistically, I have 3 elements of the soul, but I think that's going to be enough. So if I go by... I'm just going to double check that I've got this right. So I'm going to need 8 memories for Sky Stories. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Following that... Oh, sorry, 9. So I can repurpose one of those, let's say the Savage Hymn, into Horns and Ivories. So with that in mind, we've got 2 memories plus the pattern. So that's 3, which means I'd only need 2 more for Horns and Ivories. And then, of course, the drawback there is I've got nothing else left to do for the rest of the day. If I want to try and get something out of Crowcross Sands, now is the time for me to do that. I think it's tempting, but I'd actually much prefer to sort of have the bird in the hand. So I will maybe wait the 30 seconds before I make a decision on that. But that will happen in the next episode. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.